Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third week. Oh, how time flies! It's so wonderful to see that we're already in the third week. Wow. Okay. Hope we all had a wonderful weekend. Today, we're going to be discussing a very, very important topic in this course, the new ICS requirement. I know that is one key area that is very important for all of us to pay attention, to understand, and to implement. So this morning, our activity will run, we'll have a welcome, we have an icebreaker, we're coming from the weekend. So we need to get back to the mood of, the class and this learning environment. And then Brian will take us through the overview of the ICS requirements, the ICS organization as the staff, what has changed, what is still remaining. We have a discussion, clarification question, which we always love for people to always, put in those questions, because this course is not like any other course in college. It's a course that you have to implement. So those who are going through this course have it's a must that they implement, because it's what the organization needs, and it's what is required by organization to move to the next level. So from there, we move to the core ICS procedures, the documents, the records, and then after that, we also have the quick discussion. And then finally, we have an open discussion, clarification, question, brainstorming how things should move forward from this end. And then finally, we look at the assignments and the brief for the week. Okay, permit me to stop sharing this, and then we go to the break, and let's do some brain teasing this morning. So, okay, can you all see my screen? This morning, we have two wonderful questions. Yes, I would love to hear people speak. And if you're not in a good place, you can write it on the group chat, but I would like to hear some voices this morning. So we have two questions. The first one says, what's full of holes but never holds water? What is that thing that is full of holes but never holds water? And the second one is, what has to be broken before you use them? What has to be broken before you use them? First one is, what's full of holes but never holds water? What has to be broken before you use them? So I want to know. Okay, the answers are coming. You have to answer the two. Don't answer one and leave the other. Make an attempt. Okay. The answers are coming in the chat. Try to make an attempt to the two questions. Don't leave one. Try to make an attempt. Olivia, Mercy, Fred, I want to hear your voice. Vincent, I want to hear your voice. 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 Be fast. We're going to end this in another 2 minutes, because we have a very full day. And in the midst of this buffer, I hope you were able to do your assignment, because you were asking yesterday that the assignment is not open. The assignment has been open since the beginning of the week, and people have actually submitted. So I encourage that you go back and check and submit your assignment. Probably your network, if the network is not too strong, then it's always showing as if the things, the activities are not there. Okay, we lost someone. Please come back. We know that the network all over the world is messing up right now. Okay, we have another answer. I want to know, no. I want to know. Okay, Fred says question 2, passion fruits. Okay. Fred says question 1, pie. Okay. Buffalo said question number 2 is egg. Okay. Fred, because you're a farmer, I understand. Farmers will always like to put and buffer you because you are farmers or you work with farmers. You always okay. Olivia said question 2 is coconuts. And question 1 says soil. You see, we are working with farmers, so they think they think it differently. Wow. Okay. Okay. So Vincent says number 1 is sponge, number 2 is egg. Okay. Messi says number 1 is sponge, number 2 is egg. Okay. So yes, thank you for answering this question. Everybody is correct because if we look at it from the 2 different angles that each side actually put up from the farmer side and from an ordinary person perspective. From the farmer side, yes, soil is correct. Yes, soil holds is full of water, but it's full of holes, but it never holds water. The water has to drain out, whether we like it or not, somewhere, somehow, or the plants or the trees will take, the water away from the soil. But the soil will always have water at every point in time. So relatively, it might not be totally correct because what the soil is full of water. So for the second people that says sponge, yes, sponge is the very, very correct answer. Sponge has a lot of holes, but it can never hold water. Once you put it in water, everything drains away. For the soil, it's going to take a long time before it drains away. Okay, for the second question, what has to be broken before you use them? Someone said coconuts. Yes, coconuts, you have to break it before you use it as a farmer. Oh, okay. And then another person said egg. Yes, egg is you have to, you have to break it before you can fry, before you can even when you boil it, you have to break it before you can eat it. That's one peculiar thing about the egg. So thank you for answering this question. Thank you for, trying to go back to the mode of learning this morning. Thank you. Yes, we go straight. Yes, we go straight to the course. Let me stop sharing, and then I will hand over to Brian because it's a full day. Over to you, Brian.
Just a moment as I share my screen. Hope, let me know when you can see it. I hope you can see it now. Oh, great. I'll just put it in presenter mode. Okay, yes. Thanks, allow me. I really like the whole concept of having more than one answer to, to a question. So I really like the coconut answer. I thought that was smart. Even passion fruit, you can't eat it without breaking it. I like the soil, especially if it's an organic soil. So, I'm happy. I like the creativity that comes with those readers. Great. So with a bit of that excitement, I think we can now, dive into the session. If you remember, during our introductory session, we talked about 3 modules or three levels of this course. So we did the group of operators, composition and structure in week 1, which was our module 1. We did the organic production rules, which was module 2. We did it last week on Monday and Friday. So this week, we're actually handling our last part of the course, which is module 3. And we're talking about the ICS, our favorite, beloved ICS. And I'm sure you've all interacted with the ICS in one form or the other. Either you are an ICS manager, an ICS inspector, or a field officer, whichever. So I'm really looking forward to having a good discussion with all of you. Again, same format. We are going to have mostly presentation from my side today, but feel free to ask questions. And then on Friday, we shall have our debrief as already. Of course, there is an assignment which we can also use for our debrief session. So when you talk, so basically we are looking at, and as I mentioned during the introductory session, so it's the goal of the new EU regulation is about compliance. And if it's about compliance, there is some element of prescription. A big part of it is prescription of what you have to do. So it goes into a little more detail than previously we are used to. We've had a little bit of flexibility how we run our ICSs, and it was always the duty of the inspector or the certification body to confirm whether the ICS, the way we structured it, is good enough. In this new regulation, there is prescription really around so many parts of the ICS. Prescription around the ICS procedures and how we run them. I mean, it's the same components, but rather more prescribed how we have to run. For example, there are clear procedures that we should have in our ICS, ICS documents and records that we should keep. There's a prescription around the ICS staff, who is an ICS manager, what roles do they play, what qualification do they have, what ICS inspectors are, etc., etc. In terms of, procedures like when and how much of the annual internal inspection we have to do, how we manage non-compliance, traceability and product flow on training, etc., etc. So a lot of these components, you certainly know them and you've interacted with them in the old regulation, but here they are more defined and in a bit more detail because, again, the goal is about compliance. And we have to achieve compliance, then we have to follow same rules across the board, whether we are within the EU or outside. And obviously, that's what the certification body will use when they come to your operation to check whether you're compliant or not. So, and I remember we had a comment, I think on Friday, where somebody talked about a situation where you're managing more than one standard. Typically, when you're certified on, according to multiple standards, we set up one ICS. We don't want to set up one for the NOP, one for EU, one for, Rainforest Alliance, depending on whichever standards you work with. The whole idea is to build everything within one ICS. Obviously, there is flexibility when it comes to all other standards, the US, NOP, or even other sustainability standards, but the EU is rather more prescriptive, which is a good thing because actually, if you meet the new requirements according to the EU regulation, then it will be very easy for you to meet requirements of all other standards that you're working with. So in a way, it helps you to strengthen your ICS, making it compliant to a whole series of standards that you may want to work with. So of course, we are following all the discussion today is going to be following the requirements of the EU standard, but knowing that sometimes you really need to, of course, put a little modifications on the edges, depending on what, for example, the NOP wants, so other standards you work with. But, in most cases, if you comply with these requirements you're going to discuss today, then it will be very easy for you to meet any other standard. So, with that brief introduction, I want us now to look at the specifics of, basically we're going to talk about staffing because that is a core part of the ICS requirement. And then in the second part, we shall talk about, the procedures and etc. Like I said, it's well defined in the standard. Who should work in the ICS? What competences they should have, etc. According to the standard, the ICS needs well-qualified staff to ensure the organic integrity of the product from the group of operators. Remember, ICS is for group of operators. I remember, I think in the first week when somebody asked, okay, we've been under contract production, so we have an ICS for the farmers, then we have an ICS for the company. No, ICS is for it's for group certification, which is under the group of operators structure, which we discussed extensively during week one. So the group of operators needs to appoint at least an ICS manager and one or more competent internal inspectors. And this is an extract from the standard. You can check, the article at the bottom of the slide. Those are the bare, minimum for an ICS to stand. It should have an ICS manager and it should have internal inspectors. As we shall see, the number of internal inspectors depends on the size of the ICS, on the geographical distribution of the ICS, etc., etc. But at least it should have somebody that is called an ICS manager and somebody or many people called internal inspector. And in bold, these positions shall not be combined. I think this has been actually existing, though I know, and I've visited some ICS in the former regulation, where, the ICS manager and internal inspector actually is not a clear distinction of their roles. Here, they two have to be distinctively separate. Who is the ICS inspector? Who are the internal inspector? Sorry, ICS manager, who are the internal inspector? Those two have to be completely different. And the roles and responsibilities of each of these two roles have been prescribed by the standard. So you don't even have to crack your head. What does an ICS manager do? What does an internal inspector do? The regulation itself clearly stipulates what the roles of each of these two are. And we're going to look at them. So here we are to talk about the ICS manager. And as I've been referencing, I remember from day one, that the ICS manager is really the driving force for the functionality of an ICS. This is a very, very critical role. That's why we now have that provision that, of course, as farmers get certified separately from the company, that at least the company can delegate somebody who is of the right qualification, the right understanding, of course, understanding in the sense of they know the English language, they can communicate with the certification body, etc., etc. So it has to be a certain caliber of person to be an ICS manager, not any lead farmer, not anybody, because here you really transacting business, not only because of on behalf of the farmers you're representing, but now you're entering into contract, you're negotiating the certification body, you're taking decisions, etc. That's why at the bottom left corner, the standard says that the ICS manager role requires a senior position within the organization. You have to be somebody with that level of decision making. You can take decisions on which farmer can be part of the group of operators and which one cannot because of violation, etc. So you should have those powers to take such, to make such critical decisions. Let's say with authority and management capacity, as well as technical skills to understand the regulation and manage compliance. As an ICS manager, you should read the standard, understand the language of the standard, be able to interpret and translate those requirements into day-to-day aspects that the farmers, your members, and the other staff have to follow. So you have to be quoting and referencing the standard as an ICS manager. And on this note, please, as an ICS manager, if that's your role, please make sure that you can print at least the core standard, that you have it next to you, so you can, really you can easily speak to, some of these requirements. So the ICS manager going to the roles, which are clearly stipulated. Number one, they are the ones to verify eligibility of the group of operator members, to approve new ones and production units by existing farmers and activities of members. So as an ICS manager, you are the one to take the decision of any farmer who wants to join the group of operators to approve them, to verify, sorry, you have to verify, then you approve, and even those existing ones that have got a new plot, that are doing new activities, maybe they are producing a new crop that they were not producing before, you are the one to approve that. Meaning that the farmers or the members have to communicate what they want to do differently from what you know on the farm, and you as the office manager, you will approve. The power of approval. And as we go, you will see what powers the ICS manager has and what powers the certification body has. So in some instances, as we shall see, as the ICS manager, you collect the information, acknowledge that, okay, this can qualify for this, and in some cases, the standard calls out for you to go the extra mile of informing the certification body. So some decisions you take at your level as the ICS manager, others you have to escalate the certification. But if you remember last Friday, we were talking about retroactive recognition. Yes, you'll get all the information, know that this farmer qualifies to get retroactive recognition of conversion period, and then submit that to the CB to approve. And wherever such a thing happens, the standard has called it out. I don't know if you remember anything else that we said, you know, the CB needs to approve, but at least that one, you should remember. There was another one around externally used input. You know, we also discussed already last week. You collect all the information about input and then send the CB to approve. But for joining the group of operators, registration of new production units, those ones, that is the responsibility of the ICS manager. You don't, I mean, when the inspector comes, you can inform them, but that is powers vested in the role of the ICS manager. The second role is to develop ICS procedures. Procedures mean the how. You know, how do you do, for example, when it comes to registration of new members, how do you do that? So the whole narration of who does it, when do you it, what you know happens, etc. That is what we call a procedure. And that is the role of the ICS manager to document that. When an external auditor comes, they'll just ask, okay, what is your procedure for registering new members? Then you have to bring it out, or you have to describe what is the process. Do they make an application? Does the group maybe committee has to sit and approve? You know, all that you have to document. And for procedures for everything, we are going to see many procedures, but that's the role of the ICS manager. So I think you understand why we are talking about somebody in a senior management position, somebody with, you know, that ability to write procedures, to, you know, do such things, which not everyone can do. And ensure so documents, records, and ensure that they are kept up to date, including the list of members or list of farmers. That is all the power of the ICS manager. Number three, they have to schedule internal inspection and ensure that they are adequately implemented. That's the ICS manager. Who does that? The ICS manager is the liaison to the certification body, meaning any communication between the group of operators with the CB is the ICS manager who does that, who brings information from the CB and then this, you know, shares it among the members, when to schedule, when to be inspected, to, you know, all those. It's really the point of contact. That's what we mean by liaison. It's the go-to person when you want to talk about that group of operators. They will ensure training of ICS inspectors, but actually not only ICS inspectors, all people who are handling the product. For example, the purchasing teams, the field officers, you know, all those. So making sure that people who work within the ICS are adequately trained in the requirements so that you can prevent violation. So ensuring that everybody within the ICS is trained, that's the role of the ICS manager. Either you train them yourself as the ICS manager, or you outsource. If you have money, get a consultant or whoever, but the role remains that the ICS manager has to ensure that internal inspector, that is included in the standard, but at some point you will hear also talk about all other people that are involved in handling that product that we do as a group of operators. Decisions on measures of, in case of non-compliances and ensuring that they are followed up. So when a farmer violates, um, what punishment, so to speak, they get, that's the access manager to decide. That's why we said we need a senior person to be able to take those decisions. And then following up to ensure that whatever measures that you've taken are followed up, implemented, that's the access manager. There should be, and we shall see in the standard, there has to be in the procedures, how non-compliances are handled and what measures are taken against which non-compliance. That one has already to be documented. So if that is documented as the access manager, then when somebody violates, then there is no negotiation of what measure you do. It's all documented. So that's all the role of the ICS manager. And of course, subcontracting, signing agreements. Remember, we talked about where now the group of operators has its own certificate, and then you have the company. So there will be a commercial agreement between the two. Who signs on behalf of the group of operators? It's the ICS manager. So basically, the ICS manager is doing many roles. They are doing a managerial role because they are managing, yes, the process, etc. They are doing a leadership role because, of course, there is a whole team that they lead as well. But also they're doing the quality management role, ensuring that things. But also, yeah, in the leadership, they also do external representation. So really, an ICS manager is a very critical role when it comes to the group of operators. And when the CB comes, they will assess, by talking to the ICS manager, by asking for your qualifications, by, to see that whether you're competent enough to actually run the ICS. So this is one of the primary requirements for ICS compliance. I mean, this, again, we just emphasize, I've mentioned some of these, the ICS manager bears the overall responsibility for the group of operators certification. So really, it is within your hands as the ICS manager to ensure that things are happening. And ultimately, the group of operators can maintain their certificate. Yeah. So we talked about all the coordination activities within the ICS, talked about the internal inspection, liaising with the external inspection body, certification body, managing all other ICS staff, ensuring they are trained and they know the requirements, the quality control, organic quality control, not only in production, but also in processing activities, all that. And that will require somebody who has some level of education and able to understand standards and, of course, also develop procedures, as I mentioned. It is always, why we put it in blue. There are other recommended ones, which are good to have. So, for example, if the ICSF manager also speaks the local language, it's always good, that they can communicate directly with members. But what is mostly critical is that they speak the language of the certification body. And most certification bodies, of course, communicate in English. So you have to know that language of the certification body. I know some of you may take this as a given because coming from Uganda, Ghana, Nigeria, it's obvious. Most people with certain level of education can express themselves in English, but that's not the case for certain locations. Like I told you, recently I was doing some work in Ethiopia, but you find somebody who is even a master's holder, but still struggling to express themselves in English. And we really had a huge challenge to recruit ICS managers where we had about 10 or 11 actually groups of operators. And people are qualified, they're educated, they understand it, but they can't communicate, they can't express themselves well. You can't have a discussion with them about the standards. So that becomes quite challenging. But of course, that's a side note. It's not for you. For most of you, should be okay. And obviously, yeah, you should understand the organic agriculture principles. How organic, what it means, the technical jargon that is used. Yeah, an ICS manager that has that level of understanding always is good. So meaning that qualification, for you to do that, qualification-wise, either you are from agriculture background or animal husbandry, crop husbandry background, or at least rural development or something like that. So at least you're closer to the agriculture profession. There it is easy for you to actually understand this. But of course, I've seen also very good ICS managers who don't even come from the agriculture or livestock related background. So it's really the understanding, not only the technical training. Though with the right technical training, it becomes easy. And of course, yes, there is a bold one. You know, you may not have conflict of interest. So that's why in most cases, a member, you know, a farmer or maybe a lead farmer as part of the group of fighters should not be the ICS manager, because if you are a member, you are one of the farmers, then it's very hard for you to take some of these, especially punitive action, where somebody violates and then you have to sanction them. And you're a farmer, your heart will always, you always have a soft spot for fellow farmers. Or we sanction him so he will not sell. If he doesn't sell, then his children will not have food at home, they will not go to school, etc., etc. So you can easily be compromised if you're a farmer yourself. But if you are not, then you have some level of independence. So that's why even for very active um, group, we still don't recommend that um, the access manager is a member of the group of operators. I know I'm sharing a lot of information. Please put some questions if they come up in the chat, and we shall have a time to look at them. This is now an extract from the regulation, again, to clearly show how detailed, the regulation is when it comes to the role of the ICS manager. This is a very, very critical role, and it has to be, you need to, any group of operators to stand, they really need to put a lot of attention to it. I've already talked about these roles, but I'll repeat for emphasis. Verifying, who is eligible to join the group of operators, who is not. And in this instance, and why we are trying to make a link to the criteria, if you remember in week 1, we're talking about which farmer can be a member, what size of holding can they have, below 5 hectares. And if they're above 5 hectares, the anorganic cells, etc., etc. They were also talking about, geographical proximity. So we are talking about the size of the group of operators. So who takes all of this decisions? The ICS manager. So when somebody expresses interest to join, to check whether they're eligible, following all that criteria that we discussed, it's you, the ICS manager, to do that. To ensure there is a written and signed membership agreement between each member and the group. This I think you know. Every member of the group of operators should sign a membership agreement, which not only includes bylaws, things they have to follow as members of that group, but also some organic requirements, commitment to produce, not use certain inputs, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure that you remember, just like we've been having in existing, the old standard, if I may call it, but still existing because until December, so many of you are still operating according to the old standard, what we call the old. Developing the ICS procedures, this I've talked about it, ensure the relevant documents and records are kept up to date, all that, and make them readily available when the external auditor comes. That is all the role of the ICS manager. To draw up a list of members and keeping it up to date, that is the role of the ICS manager. To assign tasks and responsibilities of internet inspectors, when they should inspect, where, etc. Of course, we've also talked about the training. All that is for the ICS manager to do. To be the liaison or point person between the group and the certification body, including requests for derogations or exceptions, all that. Members will raise issues, and then it's the role of the ICS manager to advance them to the certification body to see whether they will approve it or not. To verify annually the conflict of interest statement for ICS inspectors, that we are going to see, but I guess most of you know that every year ICS inspectors have to sign that conflict of interest declaration. who makes sure that that is done is the ICS manager. To schedule internal inspections and ensure they are adequately implemented, that is the ICS manager who does. And this is really mentioned, you can see the level of detail. Previously, this was, you could have flexibility how we do it when here it is in the regulation. Ensure adequate training of ICS inspectors and then assessing their competences and qualifications with the ICS manager. So you recruit them, you check their competences to audit, to write, record things. That's all your responsibility. Approve new members of production units or activities of existing members. Decide on measures of non-compliance, I think this we've discussed. And of course, any subcontracting activities. All have to be. So when you're being recruited or when you're recruiting an ICS manager, normally there's a job description. So the recommendation, and that's what we put at the bottom, that you should pick some of these things and include them in the job description of the ICS manager. What we are calling the TOR. In some cases, we call it a TOR, in other cases, we call it a job description. So this should actually form the core part of the job description of the ICS manager. If you're advertising this role, or if you're, headhunting, whichever, process you're using to find the ICS manager, just extract this and include it in the job description as one way of ensuring that these roles are actually captured well. I talked about the ICS manager as one critical role. The other critical role, which you also talked about, is the ICS, or in some cases called internal inspector. The standard says each group of operators needs to appoint a sufficient number of internal inspectors who are competent, underline the word competent, and before you underline the word sufficient, to conduct the physical organic inspection of all farmers according to the internal inspection schedule once per year. Also underline once per year. So we've underlined 3 things here. Each group needs to appoint a sufficient number. That one is not prescribed. It is the ICS manager to determine the number of internal inspectors that are sufficient for that group of operators. Then I said who are competent, and I said underline the word competent. The competence of the internal inspector is what we are going to discuss below, but that is the responsibility of the ICS manager to determine that whoever they are selecting or appointing as the internal or ICS inspector have that competence to conduct the physical organic inspection of all farmers according to the internal inspection schedule, who the ICS manager actually draws this schedule. But this schedule should make sure that this is done at least once per year. In some cases, depending on which product you handle and the risks associated with that product, the CB might require you to do internal inspection more than once. But the standard or the regulation says it should be done at least once. That's the bare minimum. So let's look at the competencies, because they say they have to be competent. What does that mean? Maybe on the right-hand side is where we're talking about competencies or qualifications, where we say they should be able to read and write. Of course, they are the eyes and ears of the group, so meaning they are inspectors. They should really have that competence to be able to audit, in other words, They have the eye for details, so as an inspector, should be able to probe and verify. You don't take the answer the farmer gives you, but you're able to ask the same question in different ways so that you're able to get the information you want. And of course, they understand the farmer and the production system. You can't go like maybe from one production system and then you go to another, which you don't even know how it's done. For example, you get, I know in Uganda there's not a lot of coconut. So if you don't even know how coconut is grown, what is harvested of the coconut, you can't be the internal inspector of that crop because you don't understand. For somebody to be competent, even pineapple, you can't go to be the internal inspector of farmers, organic pineapple growers, when you actually don't know how long the pineapple grows, what they use to plant the pineapple. You know, some people still think you use seed. Um, you know, things like those. You know, you really need to understand what the production system is for you to be a competent um, internal inspector. And what is not indicated here, the internal inspector should, and this is a recommendation, understand the language of the farmer, you know, for practical reasons, because you need to converse, you need to communicate. You don't want to have a translator, somebody, whatever question they ask, then another person translates it, and then they miss out some words. And no, for internal inspectors, it's a requirement that they should understand the language so that they can be able to, to communicate, to answer questions and be able to. And that's what you have on the left-hand side. They're talking about speaking the local language. That one is a must. Initially I said a recommendation, but when you try to understand the mechanics around not an internet inspector who doesn't understand the local language, it becomes so complicated. So they must speak the local language. We already talked about being able to write, to read and write. So they should be able to write an internal inspection report for the farmers they've inspected or audited. They should understand the principles of organic agriculture. You remember for the ICS manager, it was a bit optional. They could, yeah, they could understand, it is good which they do, but for an internal inspector, you should be trained and understand the principles of organic. Preferably, you should actually be an agriculturist or somebody really who understands organic production. And that goes to understanding the organic production rules and ICS procedures. And of course, they should be trained. They need an annual training on an annual basis every year to be reminded, to be refreshed, so that they understand the rules by which they are playing. Yeah. The same, just like for the ICS manager, we need also to protect against conflict of interest, to jeopardize um, uh, any conflict of interest that can jeopardize the integrity of the system. Meaning, farmers can actually be internal inspectors, but then they don't inspect within the same group. We can also discuss a bit of mechanics around it. So we just want that the internal inspector is actually free. They are not related, or they are not inspecting their in-laws and things like that. All those which can, affect their judgment as the internal inspector. And again, this is right, an extract from the standard itself, from the regulation itself, where it says the ICS shall appoint an ICS manager and one or more inspectors. And that's the language that I've already mentioned to you. We're talking about the number. The number depends on the operation and how complicated it is, the structure, the size, which products they handle, etc. So that's the ICS manager to determine how many are enough. But of course also to check for the competence that they can do the job. And of course, all the qualities we've already looked at them. So competence to do this, they should carry out internal inspections, they should draft the internal inspection report based on the farmers they visited, and of course, summarize from the template that they're using, and, write or sign a conflict of interest declaration every year, and also they should be trained. And all these as they are written, there has to be evidence. That's something that we need to underline. For everything that is written in the regulation as a responsibility people should do, there has to be evidence. For example, training needs to see the evidence. Conflict of interest declaration has to see the evidence. Internal inspection report has to be evidence. So everything, as the ICS manager, you have to make sure that when this question is asked by the external auditor, you have evidence that it was done. For example, when they ask, are your ICS inspectors competent? Either you show their CV, but most importantly, you also show their records of training to show that they know the organic production rules to make sure that they know the inspection procedure, etc., etc., as we looked at them. There is another there is another role that is critical for the ICS, which we are not is not directly mentioned by the standards. The field officers, and I'm sure you all know them. In some cases, we call them trainers, extension officers, field advisors, etc., etc. Whose role is really to provide advice and support to farmers. This is very critical because, as we know, knowing or building capacity of the members is the primary goal. They first of all should know what to do before they implement it. So this is another critical role, not mentioned in the standard, but also highly, highly recommended. Yeah. Again, their role is to provide technical training, uh, uh, to basically to guide the farmers on the daily. For the internal inspectors, their role is not to train. Theirs is to check whether the right thing is being done. So who makes sure that they are doing the right thing is the field officer. So in sum, and again, that's what you see at the bottom of your screen, the field officers can act as internal inspectors so long as they are not inspecting the same group that they are advising. That's the only thing. Again, because remember the conflict of interest, because if you're the advisor for these farmers, you interact with them, you train them, you always tend to develop such a relationship because you are always in close touch with them. Then you can't again go and be the inspector because again, you can be compromised. These farmers are your friends. In some cases, they even give you some gifts and things from their farm. So then it will be very hard for you to take those independent decisions. That's why if you are, for example, a field officer in one location, then you can swap with the field office of that location. So when the time for internal inspection comes. But I've seen, yeah, where the same field officer can also be the internal inspector. I come back to the chat. I understand there are some questions. Please let me finish this slide, and then I can look at the chat. And of course, other members in the ICS, the purchase staff, also, we are not saying it's only the ICS manager, the inspectors, and field officers. There are also other people, the purchase team, whose role is also very important because, as we saw, when it comes to requirements around traceability, around separation, around making sure that our products is not contaminated, they also play a very important role. And that's why we are saying the purchase team also need training. What are the ICS procedures? What are the separation procedures? What are the traceability procedures to make sure that the organic integrity is protected? And especially if both organic and non-organic products are handled, which in the new regulation would not be a big risk because, as we said, the group of operators should only handle organic products. So that may not be a big risk. This is more at the company level. If the company is certified um, to purchase and market, then they could handle different qualities. And as a result, they need also training so that they can separate the organic from the non-organic and making sure that the risk of contamination is greatly minimized. So in terms of the organizational chart, it could look like this for the ICS. For those of you who understand this language of organization chart, so how could we structure it? So you have the ICS manager on top, managing everything, and then you have the internal inspector, the field officers, the purchase manager. You can have many, and in some cases they even have the documentation officer, who sometimes they are called the M&E or whatever. So basically, who help to keep or make sure that the documents, the records are kept safely, especially for future reference, for, yeah, external auditing purposes, etc., etc. So it could look something like that. And yeah, each one in this. So when you write your ICS manual, obviously you need a chart like this. I'm sure for most of, even in the old, most of you have this, and then the role of each one of these persons or individuals have to be mentioned. Luckily for the ICS manager, you pick from the regulation, it's already indicated. For the internal inspector, it's already indicated. Then for the others, obviously um, you 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 also detail them. Yes, managing conflict of interest. I think we've talked about it when we're talking about the ICS manager and the role they do, managing conflict of interest. But ultimately, it's the ICS manager to ensure that whoever is in that organization chart can actually do their role without being compromised or biased. Starting with the ICS inspectors, they have to sign that declaration every year, and making sure that where they do more than just internal inspection. For example, we talked about where the field advisors or field officers are internal inspectors, that they don't inspect the same farms that they have some relationship with. So that role of ensuring that, you know, there is no conflict of interest, that is purely the role of the ICS manager. Ensure that nothing is compromised at that level. Great. I want to pause at this point and look at your questions. I think I can see some in the charts and we can have some little discussion. Starting with Bafum. Should there be a sanction and approval committee to verify, I guess that's what you wanted to write, and approve
Yes, exactly
inspectors'
so.
report?
Verify.
Yeah. It could be there. Again, depends on how you want to run this as the ICS. But you're talking about, I think you're talking about two things here. There is sanctioning and sanctioning because of because of violation of requirements. So for example, if a member has violated and we need to sanction them, the question is who does it? That's one part of the question. And then there is another one where you're talking about approving internal inspector and who qualifies to be an internal inspector. Do I understand your question right, Bafu? I see those two parts.
Yes, both questions. Yes.
Okay, great. We are going to look
who approves the internal inspections work after they have inspected the farms? Is it the approval committee or the ICS manager can?
It's the ICS manager. According to the regulation, it's the ICS manager who approves. So as we said, internal inspectors will go out with a template, which has also to be defined, to do the internal inspection. And then they summarize whatever they've done into an internal inspection report, which they hand over to the ICS manager. Then the ICS manager will approve that they've done a good job or not. Remember, accountability for internal inspection exercise is for the ICS manager. So basically the internal inspectors he basically delegates them to do that role, and then he comes and approves that yes, they've done a good job. And based on that report, then he can take certain decisions. For example, for those that have violated, it's him now or her to decide that, okay, now this one can't continue as organic, they need to go back to conversion, etc., etc. These ones have acquired new fields which need to also to be registered, etc. So all those decisions happen after the internal inspection. So after he gets all the information, he or she will process it, update the farmers list, etc., etc. That is the ICS manager, including the sanctions to be done. For some group, depending on the registration, they may be required to have a committee that does sanctioning, not only because of organic rules, but also other group membership. Because remember, for most groups, they also have bylaws where members are supposed to follow certain things. For example, it could be around, they could have a bylaw that all members have to sell their products through the group. And ultimately, after the internal inspection, or after, you know, they understand that, oh, this farmer produced, but actually they sold only 10% through the group. In organic, that's not a non-compliance, you know. They can sell whatever percentage, but for the group, that will be something that needs some sanction because you violated the rules of the group. Remember that agreement we said each member has to sign with the group? And that committee can be charged with the responsibility of taking not only sanctions for organic, but also sanctions for other violations within the group. So it could be a committee, depending on your setup, but those decisions, the ICS manager has to be part of, because that's what the regulation says. And even if it's done by the group, your procedure should document what happens to that farmer and how do we, for example, if a farmer used unallowed input and we need to take them back to conversion, then it's the ICS manager's responsibility to make sure that within, you know, that farmer, first of all, restarts conversion, but also within the conversion period, they don't again violate additional. So in simple terms, yes, the ICS manager is enough with or without the committee. I hope that is helpful, Bafo. Does that clarify?
Yes, I have had a clearer understanding of it. Because previously we were sending all our forms to the approval committee who will approve, and then we pay a fee for them for doing that. So now that the ICS manager can do that, I think it's going to be
exactly. But it doesn't diminish. If you have a committee and it's doing a good job, let them also continue doing that. But the ICS manager should be part of that committee because this is a core responsibility according to the regulation of the ICS manager. So they should join that committee to understand what kind of sanctions they're also giving. Because remember, for example, if somebody has violated and used unallowed input, part of the sanction is to restart conversion. And it's him or her, if they are part of the committee, to raise that awareness. Otherwise, if they are completely different, then they might meet some of the requirements according to the regulation. So they should join that committee so that the appropriate sanctions are applied. Vincent, you're asking, who is the ICS? Is it the group of operator members? Wow, that's an interesting one. Let's probably, when we say, let's talk about it in full. It's an internal, it's a system. ICS is not one person. It's a system that comprises people. Yeah, we've talked about the ICS manager. We've talked about the ICS inspectors. We've talked about the field advisors. So it includes people. It includes procedures of how things are done, procedure for registration of new members, sanction procedures, internal inspection procedures, training procedures. So it has procedures. It also has, you know, records and documents, you know, that support it. You know, of course, when you talk about procedure, they have to be documented, but records also as evidence of what has happened. For example, those records could be the list of farmers. Actually, even before we go to the list of farmers, it's the ICS manual, which now brings everything together. You know, it's the ICS manual as the first document, the list of farmers, of course, the procedures, the purchase and sales record, etc., etc. So when that combination of the people, of the procedures, of the documents and records all together, that whole system is what we are calling the ICS. Or in other language, it's a quality management system, if that's the language you understand. So when you talk about in other food handling, or not only even food handling, but any establishment, talk about quality management system, ISO 9001, ISO 22000, all those are all quality management systems. So for organic production, the organic quality management system is what we are calling our ICS. This and that help. And I see Olaomi was trying to explain it as well. Yeah. So that
Yes,
whole group of operators.
thank you.
Okay, great. That whole group of operators, the different components of what you're calling our ICS. Yes, Marcy, Brian, for our case, we have extension officers and agronomists who are now the internal inspectors and staying in their areas of operation with the farmers. And I guess these are field officers, but according to what you've just explained, it means that these have to always be swapped to avoid conflict of interest. But now it might be costly in the long run. How can you advise in this case? Very good point, Marcy. Like we said, internal inspection is completely a different exercise from, this field advisor or what extension officers or agronomists do. Those two functions have to be separate. The easiest solution is swapping, where these agronomists can do internal inspection for different farmers. That's the easy way. So if the mobility, if they can't move and swap, the other option is you have to externally source internal inspectors, get some, get other, but that is not even very sustainable, because I've been to operations where they get they outsource internal inspectors, maybe as from consultancies, organic consultancies that have some people who do this role, so they can do internal inspection for one company, they move and do for other companies. If you are in an environment where that system exists, that can be. Or I've seen others where the National Organic Agriculture Movement has a pool of people. In Uganda, it's called Nogamo. In other, I think in Ghana, it's called Goan or something like that. That have a pool of trained people who can do this role. So as a company, when it's your time of internal inspection, you hire them, and then they come and do this on a contract to do the internal inspection. So you don't have to, swap your internal one. But Uganda, I know such a system does not exist. So the cheapest for you is to get these agronomists to travel across regions, because I think it's still cheaper. So even if you have agronomists based in the east, they can, at the time of the internal inspection, they can travel to the west and do the internal inspection, and then after they go back to their farmers, and vice versa, meaning agronomists from the west going to the east. But the question will be, yes, besides cost, do they understand the production system? Do they understand the language? Are they trained in the particular crop? Because I know east and west doing in different crops and things like that. So there's a bit of complication, in swapping, but that is again the role of the ICS manager to determine what works best. But the principle or the rule is you can't be an internal inspector for the same farmers or group of farmers that you do the extension exercise with. That is so. It's a bit tricky, but you have to see that does not happen, because conflict of interest definitely will happen. Martha, I don't know whether that helps, but you can add a comment in the chat, and I'll see whether I don't have a perfect solution, but I think, yeah, you can discuss and see how to go about it. Fred is saying, if the processing exporter does not have its own ICS, how will it ensure quality control when doing purchase? Exactly. We don't call it ICS. It has a quality management system. Definitely. They need to have a quality management system that ensures that they control the organic quality. Definitely, they should have that. We don't call it the ICS because for a long time, ICS has been a common word we use for group certification. So for you, we shall call it something else, meaning that whatever the ICS does, for example, if you're a processing company, you need to have procedures of how you procure things, from the farmers, how you procedures for traceability, procedures for training of your workers, people who purchase, people who handle, blah, blah. Obviously, the food safety is an additional requirement because we are processing. All that, needs to be clarified. We will not call it an ICS per se, but we shall call it some form of quality management system that you also need to ensure that. So, in other words, the ICS we are discussing in this training is for group certification. But when it comes to a processor and trader, you also need to have some procedures. You also need to demonstrate that you are managing the quality well. Fred, does that help? Please indicate in the chat. Matthew, what about ICS manager or team doing mock audits or even spot checks to verify the data collected by internal inspectors? I mean, the ICS manager can do spot checks. That's okay. For example, you sent out an internal inspectors and then according to the report you're reading, maybe you see some contradictions or you suspect some quality issues. You can do the spot checks because you want to, you remember? The responsibility of ensuring that the internal inspectors are competent is the responsibility of the ICS manager. So if the spot checks will help you to determine that competence, then voila, go ahead and do it. That you can do. Those are all tactics the ICS manager can use to ensure that the ICS is being run properly. Yeah, totally. You don't have to wait because you remember when the external inspector comes or external auditor also does spot checks. So you don't want to be surprised. You can do spot checks on your own system to make sure that things are working well. That is granted. It's a good one. Before saying thanks Fred and Matthew, happy to help. Can internal organic system pass as group quality management system? Yeah, I mean, now we are playing with English words here. Yes, exactly. An ICS is a group quality, organic quality management system, so to speak. So you're right. Any question? I know we are. Okay. I mean, you've asked the question, so if you allow me, I want to, in the interest of time, to go to the second part of our training today, so that and please keep the questions coming in the chat, and I'll try to see if we have some time towards the end to answer more questions. So yes, let's look at the procedures. Remember, we said that there we're looking at the organogram. The people, the roles in the ICS, and what they have to do. Now we come to the other part of the ICS, which are the procedures, the documents, and the records. There is an element, what we are calling the core ICS procedures, meaning in the regulation, there are certain procedures you should have, you must have, not you should, but you must have. But that doesn't mean that those are the only procedures you have. Depending on which product you're handling, how complex your system is, you may have additional procedures. But these ones we're going to discuss are a must. You should have them in order for your ICS to qualify. So the ICS manager, remember this is the responsibility of the ICS manager to develop all relevant ICS procedures and document and keep them up to date. Meaning when an external inspector reads the procedure, that's exactly what should be happening in practice. They don't want to read something different and then in practice you're doing something different. For example, registration of members, and members, there has to be a procedure around that. How do you identify the new members? How do you verify them? What do they have to do? they have to sign. Remember, we talked about signing membership agreements. They have to be approved. They have to be included in the members list. And, an element of yield assessment, which we've not even talked about, but there should be another procedure for yield assessment. So you basically, when you write a procedure, it's kind of the sequential elaboration of what happens when it comes to that exercise, highlighting who does that exercise, when do they do it, and how it is done. If your procedure misses that information, then it's not complete. For every procedure, it should be clear what the procedure is. There is a what, who does that activity, for example, registration of members, who does that, if it's verification, who does it, how it is done, process-wise, and when. When do you register members? It is so that what, when, who, how parts should apply. You should always check all your procedures to have those elements. And that will apply for, so I said the core procedures, registration of members, and how member data is done. That's a procedure that has to be kept by all ICS, whether in Europe or Africa or Asia, so long as they are under the group certification. Internal inspection, as we said, again, how internal inspection is done, who does it, how they do it, when they do it, has to be part of that. Internal approval and sanction procedure, that is another procedure that is core and should be part of the ICS. Again, what are the non-compliances? How are they documented? What is the sanction for different types of non-compliances? All that has to be included in that. Then another core one is around traceability and product flow. This applies whether you're a group. You remember, I think, Fred, you're asking me about for companies. I think this also applies. How does the product move? How is the traceability? How is the coding, the farmer coding, documentation? What records are written by who, etc. There's an element we're also talking about internal inspection of purchasing, as I'll mention when you're talking about in detail of internal inspection. All purchasing and whatever, those have to be visited as well. Yield estimate, traceability record, all that. Another core procedure is training of farmers or members, training on ICS procedures, who trains them, when, blah, blah. Training on organic production rules. Remember, that's the job of, again, who does it? Is it your agro-extensionist? Is it your agronomist? When do they do it? And again, actually for this procedure, there should also be a manual of what is trained. The what, when you go and train. You don't say, oh, farmers are trained, blah, 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 and then, no, you need to put the content. What is the core material that is used for that training? That's the same. For all training, you always have to add the content of what is trained. And then the other one is on documents and records. Who keeps the documents and records, and how are they, where are they stored? As I showed you, some ICSs have a documentation officer who helps with this role. In others, it's the ICS manager, again, delegating as whenever it is required. That's all the job, or those are all the core ones. I'm just mentioning here the core ones, registration of members, internal inspection. These ones are as extracted from the regulation. These are the non-negotiable. You have to have these ones. Of course, on top of these, these are 6 that are listed here, but of course you can have more depending on the complexity of your operation. The registration of members, internal inspection, internal approval and sanction, traceability, training of members, and documents. So let's look at each one of them in really quickly. So when you're writing a procedure for registration of members, so the standard requires that all, should have documented procedure for registration of new members of the group. And again, like I said, when it comes, each procedure should have the what. So here the what is the registration of members. Should have the who for every procedure. You always, whenever you mention something, you have to say who does it, when do they register, and the how. So this, what you see on your screen is the how. So this is the how registration of farmers is done. You know, number one is a preliminary visit to the farm to collect the basic data. I know most of you have a form for this. So when you're writing that procedure, then you have to link to add that procedure, whether it's Annex 1, Annex 2, Appendix 1, the form they use. So it's the field officer who does the registration of farmers, and when they go to register farmer, they use this form, blah, title. Number two, the ICS manager will, so when after registering, then they'll bring the information to the ICS manager. Then the ICS manager will verify whether do they have the land size requirement. If not, if they are bigger than 5 hectares, what about the organic cells, blah, blah. So they will look at all that. If they qualify, then number 3, they sign the membership agreement. Then number 4, they will have to go through internal inspection. Number 5, then after the internal inspection, then the ICS manager approves them as a new member and will update the members list and inform the CB. And then if we are buying an organic in conversion product, then we ensure they are separated and labeled separately. And of course, you add other like a note that within the first year of registration, they have to be trained on organic production rules, on ICS, record keeping, etc., etc. So this is just a very simple illustration of how registration of new members procedure will look like. When you read this, when you look at this slide, it's very clear. You can see the what, you can see the who, you can see the when, because we are saying in the first year, we are saying blah, blah. So there is an element of time, and then you can see the how. What is not included here are the templates used. For example, for preliminary visit in step 1 that you should have, when the field officer goes to the farm, what do they use? In step 5, in step 4, when a full internal inspection is being done, what templates do they use? So what is missing here are the templates, but the rest of the information is provided. So if you have all this, then you have your procedure for registering new members. You may have a little, variations here and there, but the bigger picture should be the same. All farmers, you have to visit them before you even, to collect the basic information. You have to, the ICS man has to verify, you have to sign a membership agreement. These are all captured from the standard. So it may vary, but not so much. So we talked about the templates, which are not included in that slide. So when you're going to collect the basic information, then you can use something like this, to record, as remember we said, when you're registering total land, total holding of the farmer, we need everything. So you have to record in this, when that basic farmer data, you have to get all the plots where they have the crop of interest, where they are growing their home consumption, all the rented fields, all fields that they are growing conventional products, everything has to be included. And this time, of course, you have different templates you're using, but this is just an illustration, an example of the template you can use. Collect information, when did they start, what is the size of that land, how much of that crop is grown, when did they last use inputs, etc., etc. I'm sure most of you are already certified and those data form. Very important for, and you can add more information as you wish, but this is just, and of course, it has to be signed by the farmer. It has to be also signed by the field officer that collects. This is a simplistic one because it's just one page, but if you structure it well, it should be able to give you information. You can have 2 pages, you can have 3. That's your decision as the ICS manager to adapt this template to your needs. In the verification, step 2, as I've already mentioned, this is what the ICS manager wants to be sure that the farmer has the land size does not go beyond the limit, because this is also defined by the regulation. That they are not registered by another group of operators. I don't know whether I've emphasized this before. A farmer can only be registered to one group of operators for the same crop. So for example, if they are coconuts, they can only be part of one group of operators for coconut, but they can be part of another group of operators for cocoa. A farmer can be in multiple groups of operators for different crops, but not for the same. So it's the ICS manager to verify. Of course, the field officer who captures the basic data should be able to ask some of those questions. And meaning that question should be also part of the basic data form, basic farm data form. But also, of course, when the ICS manager sees, oh, this farmer is, then they can stop. They can declare them ineligible to join. Geographical proximity also can be determined at that stage by, so if, for example, this farmer is way off from other farmers, as the ICS manager, you can, for practical reasons, you can decide not to admit that farmer because they are not geographically proximate to other farmers. Then, of course, you also have to watch how many farmers do you already have in the group of operators. If we have 1,999, then that means we can only admit one more farmer to make the 2,000. We can't go beyond 2,000. So if there are new farmers brought to you, then you can admit one and reject the others or reject all of them, because then it's taking you beyond the set limit by the standard. So that's what happened in the verification. Membership agreement signing. I think that we, for most of you should know, and I've been talking about it. They should include what rules they have to comply with. They have to, other requirements, permitting access to their farms, being present for internal inspections, etc. I don't have a template here, but I would imagine that most of you have those copies of membership agreements. What's important is that they should be in a language that the farmer understands, so meaning that the field officer is the one who makes sure that they sign. So it should explain to them to make sure that they understand what they are committing to. In some cases, you can actually indicate also what they can use or what they can't use. So they should not use unallowed inputs, and you can list some of them that they understand. They should, so all the don'ts really literally are included, and do's and don'ts, because for example, permitting access is a do, and then, being present is a do, accepting and implementing measures is a do, but also the don't can also be included in the membership agreement. Yes, and of course, remember that after the farmer has been admitted, then we also need to determine their conversion period. That is still, we are still onboarding the farmer. And as we remember, as we discussed even last week, it is the decision of the ICS manager. Whether they go through the full conversion, which most of you do, I think we had one example, or if they want some retroactive recognition, meaning they want less conversion period than the one stipulated by the standard, then as the ICS manager, you have to collect all the required documentation and submit to the certification body to reduce that conversion period. We have examples on the charts, around providing maps, providing GPS location, listing all the crops grown, blah, 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 all that information that you need to get. And of course, I'm saying blah, blah, because sometimes when you submit some information, the CB may ask for additional, which are not listed here, but they want to just be sure that this farmer qualifies for retroactive recognition of their conversion period. So just mention to the CB give them the information they want, and when they ask for more additional information, and then it will be their decision to give it or not. That you only need when you're doing retroactive recognition. If it's normal conversion, then you don't need to go through that process. You just include them on your farmers list as farmers in conversion and their conversion period, and that's enough. Yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about, updating the farmers list, showing all the information. What is critical and mentioned by the regulation is that it has to be up to date. That one you need to underline. It should always be up to date. Up to date in what sense? Should have the farmers, their names and codes updated, right? Identity, contact details, dates of registration, the total land they hold. Farmers keep on getting and releasing land, so you should be able to get that information and update. And for each production unit, the size, the location, you can also include the map, the products grown there, when they began conversion period. Conversion period is indicated per production unit, per farmer. So it's not based on the verification. You will not just say blanket that the farmer starts from year one. Sometimes, from year for 3 years. Sometimes, depending on the activities on the production, one farmer can have units under different conversion periods. For example, we've talked about retroactive recognition. So the farmer might qualify for retroactive recognition of some plots, while other plots need to go through the full conversion. So you need to indicate that that conversion per plot that they have. And also this speaks to, even as they already existing in your system, if they violate on one plot, so that plot will go under conversion. Doesn't mean that the whole farmer, the whole farm, meaning all other plots go into conversion. So that's why it's critical that you record information by the number of plots the farmer has. So that, again, it's even easier to manage, because then you know exactly where the problem is. And then when you apply some sanctions and follow-ups, becomes easy when you know exactly where the problem is. So this is just an example, and you have this deck, so you can look at all the information that you need. Yield estimate is another requirement per plot. Again, we need, for example, if growing coconut, we need to know how much they will harvest and potentially sell to the group of operators. There are different ways of estimating this, depending on the crop. Sometimes you can determine by acre. You say, okay, if you are growing pineapples, per acre, for that location, the average yield is so many tons per year. When I look at the production from this field, we can produce so much. And who does that? It is your field advisor or extension who does the yield estimate for that field. And of course, when the internal inspector comes, we'll verify that again on their internal inspection form. If you're handling a tree crop, then it's sometimes, or mangoes, then it's better to estimate per tree. And then again, compute depending on the number of trees you have in the acre or hectare, and then you can come up with your yield in that plot. Remembering that yes, yield varies by location, by farming practice. So it's good to have a benchmark, which you can get in secondary literature, the yield per acre, but then using your judgment. Because remember, you're a technical person who understands the crop, who has been trained, then you should be able to say, okay, if the ideal is 5 tons, based on this farm, I think maybe 3 tons or something. There's a bit of subjectivity, but your subjective determination has to be verifiable if the external inspector queries it somehow. Vincent, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. So should we consider the false start values when we are determining the yield estimates or the yield estimate upper limit for our crops? And then my second question is, somewhere, if I got you well, said all production units at the farm must be registered, whether they are in conversion, organic, or conventional. But then somewhere again, if I got you well, still you said all production units must be managed under an organic manner. Isn't that contradictory in one way or another, that I'm having organic in conversion? And help me understand those to the yield estimates and then this production unit issue.
Actually, I got your second question, but the first one I missed a little bit. Can you come again on the first one?
Yeah, the first question was, a few days back I was interacting with some ICS manager somewhere, and he told me that when they are determining the yield estimates, they base on FAO stat values. So if FAO stat says,
FAO, you mean FAO? Okay.
Yes, yes. And it was like, as an example for pineapples, if their value is 10 tons per hectare, then my formula should not exceed the value that FAO stat has set. Help me understand that. Is that the right way to do things, or I can have my own values as long as I can defend them? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Very good question. So, I mean, I would go to FAO stats values if I don't have any other, because remember, this is really based on a lot of aggregation, you know. So for example, you may have, and it may not go until, for example, I mean, you're from Uganda. So they may just have a yield for Uganda, which is really a very high level of aggregation, because you and me know that how a farmer produces pineapple in Luero or in Kangurumira or, you know, or ginger, whatever, varies in itself. So if you have a reference that is as close as possible, whether it was a previous study or something, that would be the ideal. We want to get to the reality as much as possible. So if you have other sources, and that's your duty, go and check. Can use Google or whatever, or other sources that you know, or your university or whatever. If you can use that which is closer, at least to a district, most ideally, that would be better. If you don't have it, maybe national level, meaning generated within the country. If you don't have it, then you go to FAO stat as yours. In most cases, yes, as he rightly, your colleague said, because of too much aggregation happening at that level, you shouldn't get way above that, because already that one is more or less upper limit, so to speak, because it's taking the most ideal, and sometimes they take monocropping, monocropping system, where spacing is, very standardized, that's what you'd get. But we know in our context, for most of the farmers, they do a lot of intercropping and what, so they don't even have the optimum plant population per unit area. So it will be very hard that your yield will actually be, that you can justify that your yield is much more than that, so to speak. So I would agree with your friend that if you use the FAO stats figure, better count it as your upper limit, and then, down the, reduce it downwards based on how your farmer is working. Then on the question of, yes, there are two things you're talking about here. The first requirement, and this we mentioned during our module 1, when we talk about the 5-hectare limit for members of group of items, we are referring to all parcels of land under management by the farmer, whether organic or not. So we are including all organic plots for the main crop, all plots where they are growing the food for home consumption, all rented land, all that we need to document it when we are registering a new farm. That speaks to the part we are talking about. They don't all have to be organically managed. And I remember I mentioned that a member of a group of operators can manage conventional plots so long as they don't, it's not of the same crop, of the same organic crop. So for example, if their crop of focus is pineapple, that's what they are producing as organic. On that conventional plot, they should not be growing again pineapple. And the answer, the reason is obvious. We don't want cross-contamination or, that will be parallel production, which I think you all know. Parallel production is not allowed, even in the old standard. Parallel production, no, because again, how do you know by looking at the pineapple that this one came from the organic and this one came from the conventional? It's very hard. And if you have a farmer who is not decent enough, they can fraud the system. So a group of operator member can have conventional or non-organic plots, so long as the crop is not the same. And so long as there are clear separation in terms of the inputs they use, and if there is clear separation, that's okay. So meaning, we can't, and I also mentioned this, in the group of operators, we can't have organic and non-organic farmers. So meaning, we can only have organic farmers, but the organic farmers can have some conventional production, so long as the crop is different. Vincent, help me, tell me whether that is clear. I know it can be confusing. What they're saying. Pardon me?
Yes, it is clear on my end now, but now I'm learning that if I've registered an organic field, even the intercrops in that organic field must be handled in an organic manner.
Exactly.
And then I'm free to do other things if I want to in the conventional fields, as long as my priority crop, which is organic certified, doesn't exist in the conventional gardens as well.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So when we talk about this organic thing, it's the plot, it's the unit, the production unit. So if we are growing up pineapples there as organic, so because you bring your tomatoes and they are non-organic, you can't grow them on our organic land because they would compromise the organic quality of the pineapples on that field. But you can get another field, and then you grow your tomatoes conventionally. And so long as there's clear separation, that is okay. Great. I think I had another hand. Sorry, I can't see. Vincent, is that another hand or?
No.
It's my hand, please.
Oh, okay, sorry. Please, go ahead. I couldn't see because I'm projecting. Is that?
Good. I would want you to elaborate on the mathematical formula for yield calculation as it's being shown on your page. Typical yield over hectare times total area of the production unit, or typical yield over plant times number of plants. It's quite confusing. So if you can elaborate and show us how it is done.
I actually see where the confusion is. When you say typical yield over hectare, it's like per hectare. However, said it's a presentation which is so meaning, for example, if let's say pineapples, again, I'll use the example, and we know the typical yield per hectare is 5 tons for discussion's sake. And then the total area the farmer has is 3 hectares. So how we get the total hectare, the total production for that, we shall get the 5 tons per hectare times the number of hectares, which is 3. And the total will be 15 tons.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the same thing in the one below. It's yield per plant, then times the number of plants. Okay. Thank you. Great. Swiftly, let me try to run through my slides so we can have some time at the end. So yes, internal inspection, the requirement is 100% of the farms have to be internally inspected every year. No two ways about that. 100%, the internal inspector has to visit all of them. Collect the information. What you see on what the internal inspector should include is what you should have in your internal inspection form. You know, all the things around post-harvest, around yield estimates, around the data, around risks, all that you make sure that your internal inspection form captures all that information. And then after, of course, then the internal inspector will summarize it into what we are calling the internal inspection report. And you can also have a template for that, or you can leave it open. They can structure the report the way they want. But what is important that you know the date, who was inspected when, by who, what information was collected, any risks identified from that farm, what are the corrective action? Of course, the corrective action is the ICS manager to determine. But if there are previous corrective actions, then the internal inspector should follow up on those actions and check that they are being implemented. And of course, if there are any non-compliances identified during the internal inspection, then of course they should be part of the report. So that the internal inspector, the ICS manager can capture them and take those farmers through the due process. If they need sanction and if they need to implement some measures. This is again, we talk about how internal inspections are done. This should be part of the training. As you remember, we said the ICS manager has to ensure that internal inspectors are trained every year. Yes, that is how do they do internal inspection. And we are talking about the risk-based, meaning when, and I mentioned this also last week, when you see some practice being conducted by the farmer, approach it from the risk. What risk does it pose to the system? Remember, we had an example yesterday, last week, of farmers diverting water into the field. As the internal inspector, you should have that risk-based mindset. So, okay, if they divert it, what is the risk? Where does this water come from? Are there conventional farmers in the area, upper hill, when the water flows? So you approach it with that kind of mindset that, okay, this is the practice, but I think the risk is low, high, medium, you get what I mean. So you don't just, don't divert water into the field. Don't use water into the lower stream on your farm. No, it's not done. What is the risk? If the risk is high, then the recommendation that they shouldn't. If the risk is normal, something like that. So that's why we say internal inspection should be unpredictable as much as, because some farmers are tricky. They're tricky, they can play some games. So when you have to go, it can be a tactic, of course, just like any inspection, if you tell them, I come on this day, I come on this, so they can act and pretend. So sometimes you can stagger it and arrive when you're not expected. You can do it at varying times of the year. Sometimes you inspect at planting, sometimes you inspect at flowering, or at harvest, depending on the risk. Again, if it's cotton, as we see in the picture, and farmers normally use, there's a risk that farmers will use GMO cotton seed, which is a big risk in cotton production. Then you should be visiting or internal inspecting during the planting season, because you want to see where they're getting their seed and blah, blah. If it is at flowering, because of a lot of pests, then you do your inspection around that time. Again, it's risk-based. When should you do? And sometimes you can also stagger it. So you do something at planting, a visit at planting, do another one at flowering, whatever. Maybe one is enough. Again, the risk will determine. Either you can determine it yourself, or the external inspector will tell you that, okay, you did one, which is the minimum, but based on the crop you're handling, maybe you need to do more. So then you may end up with a recommendation of doing more than one internal inspection. So yeah. And of course, the report, again, an example, again, telling you how this regulation is so detailed. They even talk about what should be in the internal inspection report. What is visited, what are the findings, blah, blah, as we've already discussed. A sample of the internal inspection also has to be signed by the internal inspector, signed by the farmer. This is just an example, but I'm sure most of you are already have your internal inspection forms and just have to adapt any new requirements that you've had or seen as we are going through this session. Training of internal inspectors, you remember that was another procedure we talked about. They have to be trained every year by the ICS manager if they have time, or you can hire a consultant to train them. But when you're documenting, you should always document what are they trained in, add a copy of the curriculum, and if there have been some trainings with a requirement to have at least once in a year, so the list of attendants who attended, and you know, what was trained, that will be good to have every year. Then there was another standard on internal approval and sanction procedure. This is, again, just like registration of farmers, this is more sequential. Number one, identifying the non-compliance. Where does this come from? From the internal inspection report. Then number two, of course, you should already have your procedure, which shows when a farmer does this, this is what happens. So you apply the sanction, update your record. Normally there is a form for non-compliances, and I think most of you should have that, and that form has two parts. On one side, where you register the non-compliance, the farmer, where it was done, you know, maybe they use an unallowed input, you put the details of the problem, of the non-compliance, and then on the other side, you have the corrective action, and then, you know, which they have to follow. And then there is a follow-up, again on that same side, and sign off when to ensure that they follow them up. So that one is not indicated here, but there has to be an internal sanction form that you use, which details the sanctions as well as the corrective action. Measures, of course, there has to be a procedure. When a farmer does this, this is what happens. And you can also even have a copy of that in the farm agreement, remember we talked about? So the farmers already know. But when I use non-allowed inputs, I'll go back to 3 years of conversion. When I lie about my yield, of course exceed my yield that was estimated, this is what happened, you know? So it's always good that that is captured already in your non-compliance procedure. And the farmers are informed and trained every year. Remember, farmers should be trained at least once a year and reminded of these. What are the measures of non-compliance and etc. And of course, when there is non-compliance, you should immediately notify, because first of all, you need to update the farmers list. So every time you update the farmers list, make sure that your CB gets a copy and they know why you're changing. So non-compliances, withdrawals that have happened, or any you're stopping procurement or from any farmer, always mentioned to them. And then of course there is now a new categorization of non-compliances within the EU, where they talk about critical, major, and minor non-compliance. You see that reference, there's an annex that shows those different categories of non-compliances. And let me see my next slide. No, it doesn't talk about them in detail. But you can see which, so obviously when it's a critical non-compliance, that one, I mean, it's critical. Then, because in some cases also it involves even recalling the product that has already been shipped to the market. So for those, they are also, and this you discuss with the with the CB. As you see, the CB shall develop a catalog and will tell you, for these, you have to recall the product. For these, you have to completely stop everything. For these, you have to stop buying from that farmer. That catalog can be determined by your certification body. For you, your job is to identify the non-compliance and then making sure that the CB is noted, and then you will work through any corrective actions that are needed together. I talked about the traceability and product flow, also procedure, exactly. Buying, who buys, where they stored. I think somebody was trying to describe that in last Friday's discussion. This one doesn't change so much. It's just to emphasize that there should be one in place. It shows where products stored, how are they labeled, how are they separated, what precautionary measures are taken, use of clean bags or different colors or different labelings or different stores, everything you do to make sure that there is no contamination and the product flow is clear. You can trace back and forth, all that documented in that procedure. And of course, this is an extract from the standard that, it always show the origin, how they are traced, information on quantities, etc. All that needs to be captured in the record. So, for example, we did a yield estimate that this farmer John in a year should sell 5 tons of this crop. Then we should be able to trace and see how much they sold, and in your traceability system, you should always be checking against the yield estimate to make sure that that farmer doesn't sell beyond the set limit. Training of farmers, we talked about training many times. We talked about training of internal inspectors. Now we are talking about training of farmers. Farmers need to be trained, and at least once. And also, there should be a procedure. Who trains them? When are they trained? Meaning at harvest, before planting, during the season. Again, ideally, it's based on where you see a lot of risks, and then you time your training so that farmers. Of course, it's a must for all new farmers. They have to be trained before they join. And then others need to be trained every year to remember and to be up to date. Of course, who does that is your extension or agronomy. Then, of course, the procedure on record, where records kept, and who keeps the records and how they updated, and tracking of different versions of the records. So version 1, then when you change, then you have a version 2 somewhere, all that. And all that is put all together into what we call the ICS manual, which should have copies of all procedures, all templates you're using, and yeah, that is your ICS manual, which I know all of you are certified, so you have an ICS manual. So just keeping it up to date, and there's a procedure for that. Compulsory records, list of farmers, or a membership agreement, or a tunnel inspection report, or and measures of non-compliance. Training records for ICS inspectors, conflict of interest statement, appointments, training group, all that needs to be traceability, agreement. A record, I always, if you were in a physical training, I would have teased you on what the difference between a document and a record is. But because we don't have time, I'll go straight to it. A record is the evidence. It's that something. Document is just a written proof of something. It could be a procedure. It could be even a record is a document. But what separates a record from a document is that this one is done. It's historical evidence that something is done. So, for example, when you look at your list, for example, a list of farmers, that's kind of putting together evidence of existing farmers. Membership agreement signed. Before an agreement is signed, it's just a document. When it's signed, then it becomes a record. just so when you do all the receipt, buying report, whatever, all those are reports now. They are no longer just documents. Yes, they are documents, but it becomes a record. You are recording what has happened. So what you see on your screen, those are, when an external auditor comes, we'll always ask for those ones. If you have an ITS manager, okay, they want to see their appointment, they want to see their CV, they want to see their academic, record. ICS inspector has all that. So you should always have that evidence together. I don't know. Oh gosh, time. This, as Olaomi warned you, this is one of the heavy modules. It has a lot of content, but that should not worry us. We have a whole session, 2 hours on Friday, when we are going to replay the same. If you want to ask me questions, ask us questions, and we can really dig into anything that you may not have understood because we had to rush through today's section. Olaomi, I know I've not left enough time, but maybe you can use the last 1 minute to inform us what comes next.
Oh, I'm muted. Thank you so much, Brian. Like I said, this is one of the heaviest modules in this course, and it's something that we really, really need. Thank you for your time. I just want to say that I noticed that a lot of us did not do our week 2, module 2 assignments and module 2 quiz. And because of this, we might find it difficult to complete module 3. And knowing fully well that this course ends this week, and next week is just for those who are intending to go to the next level with college, meaning that you want college to be able to send a physical person to your establishment to go through the new EU regulation with you physically. Then you have to do the final assignment next week. There'll be like a 1 hour to explain this assignment. And then you're able to submit it on time, on the specific time that college will, inform us or will tell us. So please, I want to encourage everybody. Please, if you know that the certificate is very important for you, you want to have the certificate, please make sure that you finish up all your activities latest by Sunday. Sunday is the deadline for all these activities for these 3 weeks. Please ensure that you do your quiz, you do your assignments, even though the timeline has passed. Go ahead and submit it. We'll still mark it because it is automatically recognized by the system. That's it. For this week, your assignment, your quiz is already on the model page. Please, and it's open. You can start on time so that you can submit on time. The assignment is due as usual on Wednesday, latest Thursday, close of business, because we have to review it, we have to mark it, get it ready for Friday class. Thank you so much.
Exactly. Thanks, everyone. We tried to answer some questions, but please bring more questions on Friday, and let's have, and of course, try the assignment. It's one way of also understanding the subject more. And looking forward to our session on Friday for more discussion. Thanks, everyone, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Brian.